All right, welcome everyone. We are back with another show with Epic Thursdays, where, as you know, we kind of talk about all things to do with peak performance and self-optimization, bringing the movers and shakers from across the world to talk about health, wellness, longevity, and peak performance, so that we can help you, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a change maker, whether you're a high achiever, to kind of get to that stage of physical and mental performance that you've dreamed of or you want to aspire to get to. This week we have a special guest all the way from Tennessee. I'm going to kind of do a quick background on her. She's got impressive credentials. And actually, in the past, we've had coaches. Carmen is the coach of coaches. So this is like the guru coach over here that we are interviewing. And as she was telling me, she's been on both sides of the fence. She's been interviewed and she's been interviewed. So I'm going to learn a lot about even getting how to interview skills as well. But before we get there, so she is a certified health coach. She's a mentor. She's a wellness practitioner. She's also the founder of the Institute for Functional Health Coaching that's transforming the health industry. And she has a lot of experience in the wellness industry. She's coached hundreds of clients, group training, teaching them how to collaborate for better client outcomes and business success. And she's also been the president of the Humane Society for 4 years. I'm going to talk a bit about that as well later, to kind of talk about her experience there. But welcome, Carmen, to our show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I have never spoken with someone from Dubai before, so our time zones are probably the furthest away that I've ever had before. Yeah, so I appreciate you.
We've been going all across the world. We've gone to Melbourne, we've been in the US and Canada, we've been in Dubai. So we kind of jetting around the world. So again, thanks for joining us. Awesome. Our topic today, Carmen, is how do you get creative with out-of-the-box ideas with optimizing your health? So let's begin by first unpacking, in your experience when you do health coaching, what do you mean by optimizing health?
So optimizing health to me means that there are 7 essentials that every human being needs to be healthy. And when we think about that, it's individual to all of us. And so the first step to me in optimizing health is really getting in touch with our own instincts and awareness of what's best for us and looking inside of ourselves. Way too many times we are looking outside of ourselves for the magic answer, the magic bullet, or the most recent trend that's going to help us feel better in our skin. In reality, the first step to optimizing health is looking within and feeling what feels good to you when you're trying to make decisions about what to eat, how to exercise, what time to go to bed, what relationships you want to have, how much fun you're having, things like that. So optimal health to me is giving yourself grace and getting present in the skin that you're in to tap into those instincts and intuitions that you have and trying to kind of shut out the outside world until you get a grip on that. That makes any sense at all, right?
Well, it makes a lot of sense. I think when people say, let's, trust your gut, I guess there's also that literal sense of, what are you feeling? And I think maybe I'd be intrigued to figure out, how do you connect this with intuition? When people talk about intuition and say, I'm feeling something, I can't explain it. I don't have the logical kind of drill for that, but that's what I'm sensing. How do you kind of make that sound logical to someone who has always believed in rational thinking and is not getting, I guess, these connections otherwise?
Right. Well, that's a great question. And one of the things is that, we have to remember many times we're living on autopilot, right? We're living outside of ourselves. We're just going through the motions of the day. And when we have a decision that we have to make or a choice that comes up, like, whether or not you want to go out and have drinks with a friend, what are you going to make for dinner? We just kind of automatically do those things. So we need to stop sometimes and get present in the moment. And when I say tap into intuitions and instincts, our body gives us all of the signals that we need to make decisions that are good for ourselves. So it's a habit that we're in to live on autopilot, right? And we get into rational thinking and thinking outside the box of what we're doing in our lives. But if you actually get still and quiet and you ground yourself in the moment, you will find that many times the decisions you're making on autopilot out here in reality aren't the ones that you're supposed to be making. Your body gives you signals. Your gut starts to churn. You start to sweat. Maybe your heart palpitates. Maybe you get this uncertain feeling inside of you. Those are signals from inside of you, that we need to pay close attention to the decisions and choices we're making. So, rational thinking is great. We need that, right? But we also need to remember that all of the answers we need are inside of ourselves first.
So would you suggest when you work with your clients to kind of take a pause? It's like a 1 minute, a breathing exercise. What's that sort of, I guess, protocol or habit they should have in mind when they feel they are out to make a big decision or they feel they're in a decision-making frame? What's the best way to kind of get back to that state of self-awareness?
Yeah. So the first thing we have to do is learn how to be self-aware, because so many people don't. So here's an action step and a crazy kind of an action step that I give to my clients to do when I'm teaching them how to become more present and aware. is I tell them, and this is going to sound a little crazy, but it works. And I've used it with hundreds of clients. When you're doing something in your normal day that you always do, brushing your teeth, pouring your coffee or whatever, something like that, the best way to get in the habit is to say what you're doing. To get in the habit of being in the moment you're in, say what you're doing. So for example, if I'm rushing around in the morning and I'm feeling frantic and kind of anxious, right? When I'm brushing my teeth, and I do these things, so something I practice, I will say to myself, brushing my teeth. Brushing my teeth. Right now, all I'm doing is brushing my teeth. It helps me to get back in my body and become more aware, so that when things come my way, I'm calm, I'm present, and I'm able to make decisions based on, just being able to see things more clearly, as opposed to running off over here and running off over here. So you can apply this all day long. So when you catch yourself feeling those feelings, you can even say, during the middle of your workday, oh, drinking water. I'm drinking water. You can literally feel yourself calm down and almost get back into your skin. It's a practice, but once it becomes a habit, then you really can just say, I'm present in my body. I'm present in this moment. So you can move away from saying those silly things that actually work into what you're talking about, taking that moment and really just saying, I'm just going to be present for this moment and get back into my skin, right? It's very powerful.
Well, that's a very interesting activity, because I think what I'm thinking also here is sometimes we like to listen to others. So when we say something, it's as if someone else is telling it to us, because we are hearing that there's an auditory signal as well that's coming in, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But it's our inner wisdom, right? The voice inside of all of us.
True. So you also, before we got on, we spoke on this idea of, how do you stress differently? And I think this kind of connects nicely with what we are saying right now. How do you make, I guess, that distinction between what's real stress and what's not real? How do you kind of decide what to act on versus what to kind of wait on?
Yeah. And it always returns to, tapping within. But so here's the thing I like to say, nothing's an emergency, but an emergency. So we run around all the time with everything being an emergency, running late for an appointment. Maybe your kid, has lost their soccer cleat. That's an emergency. Everything feels like an emergency today, and when in reality, those things might be urgencies, but they're not real emergencies. So if we can check in and ask ourselves the question when we're running late, or when dinner burns on the stove, or, we're late for a meeting, or technology doesn't work on a webinar, maybe we can say to ourselves, is this an emergency? An emergency is really what emergency is. Somebody is injured, somebody's on their way to the hospital. Those are emergencies. Running late for appointments, technology that fails us, dinner on the stove, those are things that might feel more urgent. So if we can really, tell ourselves, because remember, whatever our mind speaks, our body reacts with, right? What our body speaks, our mind speaks, our body, or whatnot, back and forth. But the point is that, we feel those feelings of stress, and then we ask ourselves the question, is this an emergency or is it just urgency? It can calm you down and get you back into that parasympathetic body response and help you to not take everything so seriously. And then I always ask this question as well. What's the absolute worst thing that can happen? What is the worst thing that can happen? And sometimes I'll have my clients say, well, I could die. And I'm like, well, how do you know that's the worst thing? What if there's an amazing place past that, right? So the worst thing you can imagine may not be a terrible thing at all.
Interesting. I mean, as you say that, what's also coming in my mind is, when you talk to those hard chargers, let's label them that, they always have this sense that, look, unless I build, even if it's that artificial sense of emergency, I can't have those neurochemicals kick in. The dopamine cannot kick in. I can't get into that state of, fighting or reacting. What do you say to that? I mean, is that true, or is that again, just something we've made up in our mind?
Well, I think it has an element of truth to it, but more than anything, neurotransmitters really drive our motivation, right? So even if we're not running around with this urgency and this emergency feeling, we still have motivational neurotransmitters inside of us that help us to propel forward. And in all honesty, if we can quiet down that overreactive fight or flight response, we can be much more productive, because we can hear the things that come in that need our priority, the appointments that are coming up, the things that maybe we can put off till tomorrow instead of feeling so urgent about them today. I like to have two lists and I'm a paper girl. I don't have a whole lot in my phone. I like a piece of paper next to my desk, and I write down the things that have to be done. Absolute deadlines, appointments with clients, interviews, things like this. And then next to them, the things that are maybe the creative parts of my business that need my attention, but they're not quite a deadline or an urgency. It helps me to look down at them and go, okay, I've got everything ready for this today. And then at the end of the day, if I have time, I can accomplish these things as well. It helps me to keep things in perspective and not spin off the map with the fight or flight that, all of those anxious feelings we can get.
Interesting. So I think that's a nice segue. You've also spoken, you're a proponent of creating boundaries to preserve our sanity and I guess our sense of being in this world. How do you kind of, I guess, first of all, decide that you need to set boundaries? Because some people may feel that, look, these boundaries are always going to keep changing, the world is shifting, etc. So what's like, I guess, the process someone could take to first appreciate that boundaries are necessary and then go on setting these boundaries in different areas of their lives?
Yeah, that's a good question too. And it's one thing, I'll just tell you from personal experience, I was never great at boundaries. Boundaries are something that are nurtured into us and that we learn throughout our lives from the time we're very small. So many people have grown up in dysfunctional families and they have not been taught what it means to protect themselves. So boundaries are really protective and not punitive. One of my therapists used to tell me that, and I love therapists. They can give us a good idea of what's going on in our lives, the blind spots we can't see. And one of the things that she said was, you're a yes girl. You yes everything. How is that affecting you personally, and how is that affecting you in your business? And I was like, well, I don't think it is. And then I went, oh my gosh. So what that looks like in business, we'll use as an example, is if you are a yes person, a person that puts everything and everyone in front of yourself, that looks like you have a little bit of leaky boundaries going on. And that allows people to come in, and instead of 1 hour consultation for coaching, it might turn into an hour and 15, an hour and a half, 2 hours. You're not honoring your own boundaries in your own time, which then sets you up for everything else getting behind in your life and feeling frantic and stressed out. So having firm boundaries is really important in your personal life and your business life. It protects you and it keeps everyone else in their own lane as well. It helps other people to understand what a boundary is and how important it is. And, in all honesty, if we don't have boundaries, we're trampling all over each other and running into each other's yards in personal ways and business ways, which creates a great deal of conflict and uncertainty in our world. So boundaries are the number one thing I think everyone should be learning about today, not only for business, but for personal reasons as well.
Well, I mean, I think the other way to also maybe connect that is that if you don't set boundaries, someone others will set them for you, and then you follow their boundaries, right? So at the end of the day, the boundaries are being set. So regardless of whether you're doing them or someone else's, and might as well kind of be actively in control of that to the extent one can, rather than wait to be that puppet that's driven by someone else's, I guess, needs and expectations.
Yeah, and one of the things I'd like to add to that is, how do you know if you have good boundaries or not? If you have this feeling when you are, let's just say, interacting with someone in your business life, like maybe a client, and they just keep texting you or emailing you and crossing those boundaries that, that's not a paid service, you can feel that. You start to get a little bit bitter and frustrated, and you're like, oh my gosh, and that changes the relationship that you have with your clients and your audience as well. So it's very important to recognize that and be able to let them know, listen, all of our communication needs to be Monday through Friday. We can do this by email, or you can pay for extra time by text. Like honoring yourself in a financial way is really important as well. And that keeps you motivated and keeps you really enjoying the work that you're doing. Boundaries are a fantastic way to stay very successful and happy in the career that you've chosen.
Well, I mean, that also, as I'm thinking, I've been geeking out on this idea of flow states. And, clearly when you have these triggers, which are not, let's say, positive triggers, but negative triggers, they don't kind of let you get into that state of flow because you're kind of just being driven by someone else's flow, right?
Yes. Yeah. And that's, triggers. It's interesting that you chose that word. Triggers is that we get triggered by certain things. And sometimes we wonder, where does this feeling of frustration and where does this feeling of anxiety or an uncomfortable feeling, where does it come from? And, triggers can come from trauma, from when we were, again, back in our childhood, we were nurtured in a specific way. And I'm not talking about mommy, daddy issues here. I'm talking about, everyone's doing the best that they can, right? And things happen to us when we're very, very small, before our frontal lobe is even developed, before we even have fully developed brains. And we start to adapt our lives as we move through those years and those times. So when we get into these positions of entrepreneurship and business and high rollers and things like that, many times people can say things to us or things can happen and we automatically get a feeling that we don't recognize. Frustration, anger, irritability, things like that. And those are really not reactions and feelings and behaviors that come from adults, right? People that are running businesses and have children and families. They come from when we're small. So if we can recognize when we get triggered by something, like someone having a poor boundary, someone doing something that we don't like, and say, that's not an adult reaction you're having, step into your adult shoes, let's see how we would handle this in a better way, we also, that's another optimizing your health thing, because you no longer put yourself into that state of fight or flight every time something doesn't feel right to you or go your way.
Well, I also, again, you said that, it reminded me of what you had said earlier, offline, that, you see adults as kids running around in adults, in like adults going like, what's that? I mean, help me understand, how have you come to that sense of, I guess, assumption or presumption, or I guess definition? That's pretty intrigued by that.
Yeah. So I think what I mentioned, or what I wrote, was, what I see today with all of the things going on in the world, and the anger and the frustration and the back and forth, and fear that's happening, is we see a lot of children running around in adult clothing. In other words, when you see people reacting with each other, and many times you might have seen this in a personal relationship. Maybe you're talking to a partner or a friend, and they might just cross their arms or get, all like this kind of behavior, right? That's childlike behavior. That's, I'm not getting my way kind of behavior, right? But when we are adults, we can look at things and say, I can see how you might feel that way. I don't agree, but let me think about it a little differently. Having adult conversations with adults is very different from having conversations with adults that are still stuck in childhood behaviors. So that's why I say, like, the world is crazy right now. There's a lot of irrational thinking and behaviors happening. And I believe that comes a great deal from traumas that we're unresolved, or that we're not willing to face. And it's showing up in our adult world today.
Carmen, tell me about your time when you were the president of the Humane Society, because that must have been a very sort of amazing experience, right? Because you must have, I guess, touched on a variety of topics that connect with that. So maybe a snippet of your, I guess, key learnings there.
Yeah, and it was many years ago. I didn't have any children. I'd moved to a new city, and I just remember being exposed to animals living on chains, very short chains, and very extreme temperatures and weather, and feeling this pull to do something about it. And I went to my first board meeting in a new town to learn what it meant to be on a board and what was going on with the Humane Society. And I was voted in as president within 45 minutes. I have no idea how it happened, except divine intervention. God intended for me to be put in that position. It was not a paid position, but it ended up being a full-time job. And I can tell you that I learned a great deal about compassion fatigue, about caring for the things, the people and the animals in the world around us, about what it meant to deal with a lot of highly intense emotions from both sides, people, bringing their animals in and people adopting animals, what it really meant to maintain myself, which I didn't do a very good job of. Talk about not having boundaries. I just wanted to save them all and make it all better. So I learned a great deal over that. It was a little bit over 4 years that I was president, about actually taking better care of myself so that I could continue to do the things that I needed to do to take care of others, and to do a job that was, a huge, huge task, a huge job running, an organization. I ended up shutting down the shelter because we were in debt over $15,000, and creating programs so we could be more proactive. And in all honesty, that ties into helping people. So what I like to do in my coaching and helping other coaches is teach people how to be proactive, so they don't have to react to what happens to the world, around them. So if we are taking better care of ourselves, if we are having good connections, putting up boundaries, addressing things that we need to face, we are being more proactive for when things like this virus, or financial economy, the financial economy falling apart, when those things happen, we're better prepared, and we have, again, less stress. It's all about having less stress, or seeing stress differently. So I learned a great deal during that time.
Yeah, it's amazing. Hats off to that for your work there.
Yeah, thank you.
So the 20 minutes have flown past, and I want to kind of finish off maybe with a couple of things that I think would be useful. So if whoever's listening to this, and we have, I've seen a lot of people watching it so far, thank you for tuning in, what's the first, let's say, the ABC principle that Carmen would teach her coaches when someone comes in and says, look, my either life is in a mess, my business is in a mess, or my health is in a mess? What would be the first 1, 2, or 3 things you'll tell them? Look, do this, and then come and talk to me again.
Yeah. So I'm a fan. I'm not a fan of saying do this. I'm a fan of saying, let's have an investigative inquiry into what could be going on here. What's the origin of how you got here? I truly believe that when people get diagnoses, right, people are diagnosed with adrenal fatigue or depression or exhaustion or anxiety, that those are symptoms of a bigger problem. So one of the first things I tell my coaches is that, don't see what people are diagnosed, and that's a word we don't use, as coaches, medical doctors use, but let's see what's going on underneath that. How did this happen? And many times it's tracing back to just asking a lot of questions and allowing that person to uncover their own answers. In 99.9% of the coaching experiences I've had with clients and teaching coaches and mentoring coaches, they always say, well, I need help with this. My business is falling apart. How do we fix this? What funnels do I need to build? And I say, actually, let's find out what's going on with you personally first. Let's dig in and find out how you got to this space. That's the very first place we have to start.
Got it. Perfect. Now, if you were to set a challenge of sorts to people who are watching this or will watch this later, whether it's over 7 days or a longer period of time, what would you urge people to do, especially keeping in mind the challenging times that everyone's faced with right now around the world?
Yeah, though that's a huge question we could talk about for hours. But one of the things that I had to do for myself was to actually, again, go through the steps like, is this an emergency, an urgency? What's happening right now? But more than anything, checking in with myself and making sure that I have my priorities straight in my personal life and my business. In fact, even just having a piece of paper, again, there's the paper, and writing what I call a health wish list. And it could be mental health, emotional health, physical health, but creating a health wish list is really powerful. You have absolutely no limits to it. There are no financial limits, no emotional limits, no physical space limits, geographical. And on that list goes everything that you would want for the life that you want to lead, right? Everything. For me, it was hardwood floors instead of carpet, so I didn't have toxins in my home, right? It's anything can go. And as you look at that list, what you can do is take a highlighter, take 2 colors of highlighters, one of them green for me and one red, whatever, pink, and highlight the things that are real in life. Love, relationships, connections, healthy food, a healthy environment. And once you go through that list and you highlight those things that are real to you, you're going to see what's a priority in your life. And this can absolutely change the direction that you're living your life today, even with all the craziness that's going on. And to me, connection, relationships, and doing everything that you can to give yourself grace when you make decisions that don't feel in line with where you want to be, it can create a much more peaceful environment for you in your personal life and your business life as well.
All right. Well, that's the challenge. Everyone's who are signing in and watching it now, we'd like to see what you do with this so we can come back and report to Carmen the sort of results of this work. Carmen, where can people learn more about you? And is there something you feel they can maybe go onto your site? We can drop the links later that would kind of help them understand how you can maybe help others, etc.
Yes, absolutely. So I have 2 websites. It's carmenhunterhealth.com that's my main LLC business. I have a shop there. There's a lot of great information. It leads out to my blog. And then for people who are interested in mentorship or working with me or doing some of my short trainings, they can go to the shop tab on there and find all kinds of great offerings that we've reduced like 50 to 70% right now because of where everyone is economically. And then if anyone wants to take their journey and become a health coach, we have a full blueprint 360-degree turn. You can have a business up and running in less than 5 months. And that's instituteforfunctionalhealthcoaching.com. And you can learn all about that. Book a call, get to talk with me or one of my graduates and learn how to use your journey to become a health coach.
All right, wonderful. Well, we'll put all those kind of links in our comments, in our show notes afterwards. Carmen, thanks very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you. I could go on talking for a lot of time because you touched on many points that could become, like, as you said, hours discussions on their own. So I appreciate the kind of energy you put into this call. Thank you very much for joining us all the way from Chattanooga in Tennessee. And everyone else, thanks for tuning in. Tell us what you thought, your things that you're going to commit to, challenge yourself to, and look forward to seeing you all next week. All the best. Have a great week ahead.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.